The bitter October wind carried the jeers of the crowd as Dahlia Adams clutched her 6-month-old son tighter to her chest, her eyes darting frantically across the sea of unfamiliar faces that had gathered for the auction in Jerome, Arizona Territory, 1882. The wooden platform beneath her feet creaked with each nervous shift of her weight, the auctioneer's booming voice announcing her lot, making her stomach twist with dread. Next up, folks, a fine young woman and her infant son, a package deal for any man seeking a ready-made family. The auctioneer's voice rang out over the dusty town square as Dahlia fought back tears, the humiliation burning through her like wildfire. 3 days ago, she had been traveling west by stagecoach, fleeing the ruins of her former life in Boston after her husband's death left her penniless and disgraced by his gambling debts. The coach had been attacked by bandits. Everyone else had been killed, but the outlaws had spared her and little Samuel only to bring them here, to be sold like cattle to the highest bidder in this copper mining town, nestled in the mountains of the Arizona Territory. Starting bid is $20 for the pair. Who'll give me 20? The auctioneer called, his handlebar mustache twitching with anticipation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some men eyed her appreciatively, making Dahlia pull her threadbare shawl tighter around her shoulders and turn slightly to shield Samuel from their predatory gazes. At 22, with copper-red hair and green eyes, she knew her looks were what would fetch a price today, not any skills she might possess. 25, called a grizzled miner whose breath Dahlia could smell from 10 feet away. 30, shouted another, a man with missing teeth and cruel eyes. $50, came a steady voice from the back of the crowd. The crowd parted, revealing a tall man in a dusty black duster and wide-brimmed hat. His face was partially shadowed, but Dahlia could make out a strong jaw dusted with stubble and eyes that seemed to look right through her. A star-shaped badge glinted on his chest. Well now, Marshal Zachariah Kane's interested. The auctioneer exclaimed, clearly surprised. I've got $50 from our town marshal. Do I hear 60? Several men who had been bidding suddenly found the ground very interesting. The marshal's presence seemed to cool their enthusiasm considerably. $75, countered a well-dressed man whom Dahlia recognized as one of the saloon owners. $100, the marshal responded without hesitation, his voice even and controlled. The saloon owner scowled but shook his head, unwilling to go higher. $100 going once, going twice. Sold to Marshal Kane. The gavel came down with a resounding crack that made Dahlia flinch. As she was guided off the platform by rough hands, Samuel began to cry, sensing his mother's distress. She bounced him gently, whispering soothing words while her own heart threatened to beat out of her chest. What did the marshal want with her and her son? Was he any better than the others, or merely more efficient at getting what he wanted? Marshal Kane approached her with measured steps, his spurs jingling softly against the packed dirt of the street. Up close, Dahlia could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30, with eyes the color of a summer storm and a face weathered by sun and hardship. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat, "if you'll follow me." Dahlia hesitated, clutching Samuel tighter. "What do you intend to do with us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. "Get you somewhere safe, for starters. I've been waiting for both of you." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean, waiting for us?" Instead of answering, he gestured toward the jailhouse across the street. "We can talk privately there. This isn't a conversation for the middle of the street with half the town listening in." Dahlia glanced around and realized he was right. Several townspeople were lingering nearby, openly curious about the marshal's unusual purchase. With few options available, She nodded stiffly and fell into step beside him. The jailhouse was a solid stone building with barred windows and a heavy wooden door. Inside, it was surprisingly clean and orderly, with a desk strewn with papers, a potbelly stove putting out welcome warmth, and 3 empty cells along the back wall. Marshal Kane closed the door behind them, shutting out the prying eyes of Jerome. He removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door, revealing thick dark hair with a touch of silver at the temples. "Please, sit," he said, indicating a chair beside his desk. Dahlia perched on the edge of the seat, ready to flee if necessary, though she knew she had nowhere to go. Samuel had quieted, his small hands clutching at her blouse as he dozed. The marshal sat across from her, his movements careful, as if trying not to startle a wild animal. "My name is Zachariah Kane. Most folks call me Zach. Dahlia Adams," she replied automatically. "And this is my son, Samuel. Mrs. Adams," he acknowledged with a nod. "I imagine you have questions." "More than I can count, Marshal," she said with a trembling attempt at firmness. "Beginning with why you bought us and what you meant when you said you've been waiting for us." Zach leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. 3 days ago, I received a telegram from the sheriff in Prescott about a stagecoach robbery. There was a survivor, a woman with an infant taken by the Hollister gang. His eyes met hers directly. "That would be you and your son." Dahlia nodded, the memories of that horrible day flashing through her mind, the shots, the screams, the terrifying hours afterward when she'd been tied up in the outlaws' camp, praying they wouldn't harm Samuel. "The Hollisters have been operating in this territory for years," Zach continued. "They rob coaches, steal cattle, and occasionally kidnap people they think they can sell." His jaw tightened. "I've been after them for a long time. They killed my brother 2 years ago." Dahlia's grip on Samuel loosened slightly as understanding dawned. "So you didn't buy us for personal reasons?" A flush crept up his neck. "No, madam. I bought you to keep you safe and because I need your help. My help. You've seen their faces. You might be able to identify them if we catch them, and I intend to catch them." His eyes glinted with determination. Relief flooded through Dahlia, followed quickly by uncertainty. "What happens to us now?" Zach ran a hand through his hair. "That's what I wanted to discuss. The Hollisters might come looking for you if they find out you're still alive. They don't like leaving witnesses." Fear clutched at Dahlia's heart. "We're not safe here. You're safe with me," Zach said firmly. "But I need to keep you close until we catch them. I have a house on the edge of town. It's not much, but there's a spare room for you and your son." Dahlia stared at him, weighing her limited options. This man had saved her from a fate she didn't want to contemplate, but she barely knew him. "Unless you have somewhere else to go," he prompted. Dahlia shook her head. "No. My husband died 6 months ago, the day after Samuel was born. His debts took everything. I was heading to San Francisco to stay with a distant cousin when the stage was attacked." Something softened in Zach's expression. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Adams." "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the familiar ache of grief mingled with more recent trauma. "For appearance's sake," Zach said hesitantly, "it might be best if people believe I hired you as a housekeeper. Jerome is a small town and folks talk." Dahlia nodded, understanding the necessity. A single woman living in an unmarried man's home would cause enough gossip to draw unwanted attention. "I'll pay you, of course," he added quickly. "A fair wage for keeping house. And once we've caught the Hollisters, you'll be free to continue to San Francisco if that's still what you want." It wasn't ideal, but it was infinitely better than the alternatives. "We accept your offer, Marshal Kane." "Good," he said, standing. "Let me show you to your new home, then." They left the jailhouse. Zach carrying Dahlia's single small carpetbag, all that remained of her possessions after the stagecoach robbery. As they walked through town, Dahlia felt eyes following them, and she kept her head high despite her tattered dress and the whispers that trailed in their wake. Zach's house sat on a small rise at the eastern edge of town, a modest but sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch and a view of the red rock cliffs that surrounded Jerome. A chestnut mare nickered from a small corral beside a lean-to stable. "That's Penny," Zach said, following her gaze to the horse. "She's friendly." Inside, the house was sparsely furnished but clean. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace and solid wooden furniture that showed signs of careful craftsmanship. "Spare rooms upstairs," Zach said, carrying her bag up a narrow staircase. "Bathrooms at the end of the hall got running water installed last year. One of the benefits of a mining town is they bring in modern conveniences faster than most places." The bedroom was simply furnished with a double bed, a small dresser, and a rocking chair by the window. Dahlia could see the entire town from here, Jerome's buildings clinging to the mountainside in defiance of gravity. "It's lovely," she said honestly. After the nightmare of the past few days, this room felt like a sanctuary. "I'll let you get settled," Zach said, placing her bag on the bed. "There's a cradle in the corner belonged to my nephew before they moved to California." His voice caught slightly. "Figure Samuel could use it." Dahlia noticed the small wooden cradle for the first time, tucked into the corner. "That's very kind. Thank you." Zach nodded and turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "I'm usually at the jailhouse during the day, but I'm not far if you need anything. Make yourself at home, Mrs. Adams." "Please call me Dahlia," she said impulsively. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Dahlia, then." And with that he was gone, his footsteps retreating down the stairs. Alone at last, Dahlia sank onto the bed, cradling the now sleeping Samuel against her chest. Tears she'd been holding back for days finally spilled over, relief and fear and exhaustion all flooding out at once. They were safe for now, but for how long? She glanced at the window, where the sun was setting behind the distant mountains, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and purple. Arizona territory was nothing like the Boston she'd left behind, and Marshal Zachariah Kane was unlike any man she'd ever known. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. The first week at Zach's house passed in a blur of adjustment and tentative routines. Dahlia threw herself into creating order from the bachelor's functional but sparse home, grateful for the distraction from her recent trauma. She found unexpected peace in sweeping floors, polishing the scarred oak table, and organizing the kitchen that clearly hadn't seen a woman's touch in years. Samuel thrived in the stability, his chubby cheeks filling out again after the ordeal of their captivity. He was a cheerful baby despite everything he'd endured, and Dahlia thanked Providence daily for his resilience. Zach kept his distance, leaving early for his duties as marshal and returning in time for the evening meal Dahlia prepared. Their conversations were polite but cautious, neither quite knowing how to navigate their unusual arrangement. On the 8th day, as Dahlia hung laundry on the line behind the house, she heard a woman's voice call out from the front yard. "Hello, Marshal Kane." Wiping her hands on her apron, one she'd sewn from spare fabric, found in a trunk upstairs, Dahlia rounded the corner of the house to find a gray-haired woman in a practical dress standing on the porch. "The marshal isn't home," Dahlia said. "Can I help you?" The woman turned, her shrewd eyes taking in Dahlia's appearance with undisguised curiosity. "You must be the woman Zach bought at that disgraceful auction." Her directness was startling but not unkind. "I'm Martha Wilson. I run the general store with my husband, George." Dahlia Adams, she replied, unsure how much to reveal about her circumstances. And where's the little one I heard about? Martha asked, peering around as if expecting to find Samuel hiding behind Dahlia's skirts. Napping, thankfully. He was fussy all morning. Martha nodded knowingly. Teething, I expect. My 5 were all terrors when their teeth came in. She held up a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I brought some things. Figured you might need them coming here with nothing. Dahlia hesitated, pride warring with necessity. That's very kind, but it's not charity, Martha interrupted firmly. It's being neighborly. Besides, Zach Kane saved my grandson from drowning in the creek last spring. I owe him more than a few baby things and some fabric for new dresses. Relenting, Dahlia invited Martha inside, where the older woman promptly made herself at home, unpacking her basket at the kitchen table. There were baby clothes, soft flannel for diapers, a wooden teething ring, and several yards of calico in practical but pretty patterns. The whole town's talking, you know, Martha said conversationally as she laid out her gifts, Dahlia's hands stilled over a tiny shirt. About the auction, I suppose. About Zach buying you, Martha corrected. Never known him to show interest in any woman since he came here 5 years ago. Then suddenly he pays a small fortune for a woman and her baby. She raised an eyebrow. People wonder. It's not what they think, Dahlia said quickly. The Marshal saved us from a terrible situation. He's being kind, that's all. Martha made a non-committal sound. Zach's a good man. Best Marshal this town's had. Hard sometimes since he lost his brother, but good. He mentioned his brother was killed, Dahlia said carefully. Ambushed by the Hollister gang while transporting a prisoner, Martha confirmed, her expression darkening. Zach found him on the trail. Been hunting those animals ever since. A soft cry from upstairs interrupted their conversation. Dahlia excused herself to fetch Samuel, returning a few minutes later with the freshly awakened baby in her arms. Martha's face softened immediately. What a handsome little man, she cooed, reaching for him. Years of motherly confidence radiated from her, and Samuel went willingly into her arms. He has your coloring. His father's, actually, Dahlia said, a familiar pang of grief squeezing her heart. Thomas had the same red gold hair. I'm sorry for your loss, Martha said gently. It's hard raising a child alone. I did it myself for a time after my first husband died in the war. Dahlia looked up in surprise. You remarried. George and I have been together 20 years now, Martha confirmed with a small smile. Life goes on, dear. Sometimes in ways we never expect. Before Dahlia could respond, the front door opened and Zach stepped inside. He stopped short at the sight of Martha bouncing Samuel on her knee. Mrs. Wilson, he said, removing his hat. Didn't expect to see you here. Clearly, Martha replied with amusement. Just bringing some essentials for your new housekeeper and this sweet boy. She emphasized housekeeper slightly, letting him know she understood the pretense. I should get back to the store. George gets flustered when it's busy. After handing Samuel back to Dahlia, Martha gathered her basket and moved toward the door. She paused beside Zach, speaking too quietly for Dahlia to hear, but something in the Marshal's expression, a mix of embarrassment and respect, suggested Martha was giving him some sort of advice. When she'd gone, an awkward silence fell between them. Mrs. Wilson seems nice, Dahlia offered finally. Salt of the earth, Zach agreed, hanging up his hat and gun belt. But she does enjoy being in everyone's business. She brought baby clothes and fabric, Dahlia said. It was very thoughtful, Zach nodded, moving to wash his hands at the kitchen pump. Martha and George look after folks. They were good to me when I first came to town. For the first time, Dahlia wondered about Zach's life before Jerome. Where are you from originally, Marshal? Missouri, he he said, drying his hands. Family had a small farm there left after the war. He nodded toward the stove, changing the subject. Something smells good. Beef stew, Dahlia said, recognizing his reluctance to talk about his past. Should be ready soon. They ate dinner in comfortable silence, broken only by Samuel's occasional babbling from his makeshift high chair, a crate Zach had modified with a cushion and straps. Afterward, as Dahlia washed the dishes, Zach surprised her by picking up a towel to dry. "Any news about the Hollisters?" she asked, passing him a plate. His expression tightened. "Nothing concrete. They've gone to ground. But I've got deputies watching the trails, and the sheriff in Prescott sent word they were seen heading south last week. Will they come here, to Jerome?" Zach considered this as he methodically dried a coffee mug. "It's possible. They might want to silence you as a witness, but they're not fools. They know I'm Marshal here." "But they don't know I'm with you," Dahlia pointed out. "They think I was sold to some miner or cowhand." "Which is why we need to keep up appearances," Zach said. "As far as anyone knows, you're just my housekeeper." Later that night, after Samuel was asleep in his cradle, Dahlia sat by her bedroom window, watching the town below. Lights twinkled in windows, and from the saloons came distant sounds of piano music and laughter. It was so different from her previous life in Boston, where her days had been filled with social calls and charity work, at least, until Thomas's death had revealed the truth about their financial situation. A movement caught her eye: Zach, stepping onto the back porch with a cup of coffee. In the moonlight, his profile looked carved from stone, strong and immovable. Yet there was something lonely about him standing there, gazing out at the night. For all his stoicism, Marshal Zachariah Kane carried wounds that went deeper than he let on. Dahlia found herself wondering what it would take to heal them, and why she cared. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dahlia was hanging fresh curtains in the kitchen sewn from Martha's fabric, when the sound of horses approaching drew her attention. Peering through the window, she saw 3 riders dismounting in front of the house. Zach had already left for his daily rounds, leaving Dahlia alone with Samuel. Heart racing, she picked up her son from his blanket on the floor and retreated to the back of the house, wondering if she should run. A firm knock at the door made her jump. "Mrs. Adams, it's Deputy Franklin. Marshal Kane asked me to check on you." Relief washed over her. She recognized the name of Zach's deputy, a gangly young man who sometimes delivered messages between them when Zach was tied up with work. Opening the door, she found not only Deputy Franklin but also 2 other men, one wearing a suit that had seen better days, the other in typical cowboy attire but with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. "Good morning, Deputy," she said cautiously. "Is everything all right?" Franklin removed his hat. "Yes, madam. Marshal sends his apologies for not coming himself. These gentlemen are from the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson. They're here about the Hollister gang." The suited man stepped forward. "James Ryder, madam, U.S. Marshal. This is Deputy Harker." "We understand you had a run-in with the Hollister gang." Dahlia held Samuel closer. "I did. Marshal Kane thought you might be more comfortable talking here than at the jailhouse," Franklin explained. "He'll be along shortly." Reluctantly, Dahlia invited them inside, offering coffee which the men gratefully accepted. Marshal Ryder proved to be direct but kind, asking Dahlia to recount everything she remembered about her captivity, how many men were in the gang, descriptions, names she might have overheard. "There were 5 of them," she said, the memories still fresh and painful. "The leader was a tall man with a scar from his eye to his jaw. They called him Reed." "Reed Hollister," Ryder confirmed. "And his brothers?" "I only heard 2 names, Jasper and Cole. Jasper was younger, maybe 20. Dahlia swallowed hard. He wanted to keep me for himself, but the leader Reed said I'd fetch a better price at auction. Deputy Harker's pencil scratched across his notebook as he recorded her statement. Did they mention where they might be heading next? They talked about Mexico, Dahlia recalled, but they also mentioned something about unfinished business in a place called Saddlehorn. The men exchanged significant looks. Saddlehorn's a mining camp about 30 miles south, Ryder explained. Not much law there. The front door opened and Zach strode in, his expression tense until he saw Dahlia was safe. "Gentlemen, I see you've met Mrs. Adams. She's been very helpful," Ryder said, standing. "Her description matches what we know of the Hollisters, and this information about Saddlehorn could be valuable." Zach moved to stand near Dahlia, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the others. "What's your plan?" "We're putting together a posse," Ryder said. "Going after them before they hit another stage or raid another ranch. Your testimony about your brother's murder combined with Mrs. Adams's eyewitness account of the recent robbery should be enough to hang them all." "I want in," Zach said immediately. Ryder shook his head. "I understand your personal stake, Kane, but you have responsibilities here in Jerome." "Franklin can handle things for a few days," Zach insisted. "I've been tracking these men for 2 years. And your household?" Ryder's gaze flicked to Dahlia and Samuel. Before Zach could respond, Dahlia spoke up. "We'll be fine, Marshal Kane. Your duty is more important than looking after us." Something flickered in Zach's eyes: frustration, concern, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. "Mrs. Adams and her son are under my protection," he told Ryder firmly. "If I join your posse, I need assurance they'll be safe while I'm gone." "I can stay at the house," Deputy Franklin offered. "Keep an eye on things." After further discussion, arrangements were made. The posse would depart the following morning with Zach among them. Franklin would stay at the house during the night, and Martha Wilson had volunteered to check on Dahlia during the day. When the men finally left to make preparations, Dahlia and Zach were alone again, the weight of their imminent separation hanging between them. "You don't have to go," Dahlia said softly, though she knew it wasn't true. "Yes, I do." Zach's voice was rough with emotion he rarely displayed. "Those men killed my brother. They kidnapped you and Samuel, put you through hell." His hands clenched at his sides. "I won't let them hurt anyone else." Dahlia set Samuel in his cradle and moved closer to Zach, driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand. "I know, but please be careful." His eyes met hers, storm-gray and intense. "I'll come back." "You'd better," she said, attempting a lightness she didn't feel. "I just finished organizing your kitchen." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Wouldn't want to undo all your hard work." That evening, as Zach prepared for the journey cleaning his guns, packing supplies, Dahlia found herself watching him with growing unease. In the short time she'd known him, this stoic, honorable man had become her safe harbor in a world that had shown her little kindness. The thought of him riding into danger twisted something deep inside her. After Samuel was asleep, Dahlia brought Zach a cup of coffee as he sat at the kitchen table, writing in a small journal. "Letters," he explained when he saw her curious glance. "In case I don't come back." "Instructions for Franklin about the house, my savings at the bank." He closed the book. "There's enough to get you and Samuel to San Francisco if necessary." The matter-of-fact way he spoke of his possible death chilled her. "Don't talk like that." "It's just being practical," he said, but his expression softened when he saw her distress. "Dahlia, I've been a lawman for 10 years. I know the risks." "And I've buried one husband," she retorted. "I know what it's like when those risks become reality." Zach stood, moving closer to her. "I'm not your husband." "No," she whispered, suddenly aware of how near he was, the scent of soap and leather enveloping her. "You're not." For one breathless moment, something electric passed between them: possibility, desire, connection. Then Samuel's cry broke the spell, and Dahlia stepped back, flustered. "I should check on him," she murmured, retreating upstairs. By the time she returned, Deputy Franklin had arrived to take up his post for the night, and Zach had retreated to his bedroom. Dahlia went to bed with a confused heart and racing thoughts, wondering when the marshal had become more to her than just a reluctant protector. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Dahlia rose early to prepare a hearty breakfast for Zach before his departure. They ate in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. As he strapped on his gun belt and reached for his hat, Dahlia handed him a small package wrapped in cloth. "Biscuits and jerky," she explained. "For the trail." Zach took the package, his fingers brushing hers. "Thank you." He knelt to look at Samuel, who was playing on a blanket nearby. "You be good for your mama, partner," he said, gently touching the baby's cheek. When he straightened, Dahlia surprised them both by stepping forward and straightening his bandana. "Be safe, Marshal." His hand caught hers, holding it against his chest for a moment. "Zach," he corrected quietly. "I think we're past Marshal now, don't you?" "Zach," she repeated, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Come home safely." He nodded once, then released her hand and turned away, striding out the door without looking back. From the window, Dahlia watched him mount his horse and ride toward town, where the posse was gathering. Martha arrived an hour later, bustling in with fresh bread and gossip about the U.S. Marshal's presence in town. "Everyone's talking about the posse," she said, settling at the kitchen table. 15 men riding out after the Hollisters." "Will they catch them?" Dahlia asked, bouncing a fussy Samuel on her hip. "If anyone can, it's this group," Martha assured her. "Zach Kane's the best tracker in the territory, and Marshal Ryder has a reputation for always getting his man." She studied Dahlia's worried expression. "You care about him." It wasn't a question. Dahlia busied herself with Samuel to avoid meeting Martha's perceptive gaze. "He's been kind to us." Martha hummed skeptically. "Zach Kane buying a woman and child at auction, taking them into his home. That's more than kindness, dear." "It's complicated," Dahlia said. Martha patted her hand. "The best things usually are." The days that followed were the longest of Dahlia's life. Each morning she woke hoping for news, and each night she fell asleep with prayers for Zach's safety on her lips. Deputy Franklin continued his nightly vigil, though he assured Dahlia there had been no sign of trouble. On the 5th day, as Dahlia hung laundry in the yard, she heard the thunder of approaching hooves. Heart leaping, she turned toward the sound only for hope to curdle into fear as she saw 3 rough-looking men riding hard toward the house. She recognized the man in front, instantly Reed Hollister. His scarred face twisted in a malevolent grin as he spotted her. The Hollister gang had found her. Snatching Samuel from his basket, Dahlia ran for the house, screaming for Deputy Franklin, who had been repairing a fence at the back of the property. She slammed and barred the door just as the riders skidded to a halt in the front yard. Come out, pretty lady." Reed Hollister's mocking voice carried through the wooden walls. "We've come to collect what's ours." Franklin burst in through the back door, rifle in hand. "Mrs. Adams, get upstairs and hide." "Is there another way out?" she asked desperately, clutching Samuel, who had begun to wail. "Trapdoor in the ceiling of the marshal's room," Franklin said, checking his ammunition. "Leads to the roof. If things go bad, get out that way and run for town." A shotgun blast splintered the front window, sending glass shards flying. Franklin pushed Dahlia toward the stairs. "Go." "I'll hold them off." Dahlia raced upstairs, the sound of gunfire erupting behind her. She locked herself in Zach's bedroom, frantically searching for the trapdoor Franklin had mentioned while trying to quiet Samuel's terrified cries. She found it in the ceiling near the wardrobe, a square panel that would open to the roof. Setting Samuel on the bed, she dragged a chair underneath it, prepared to flee if necessary. Downstairs, she heard shouting, more gunfire, then an ominous silence. Heavy footsteps on the stairs made her blood run cold. "We know you're up there, woman," came Reed Hollister's voice closer now. "Your lawman friend is taking a nice long nap. No one's coming to help you. Franklin, dear God." Dahlia bit back a sob, looking frantically around the room for a weapon. Her eyes fell on Zach's dresser, where she knew he kept a revolver. She yanked open the drawer, finding the gun and checking it as Thomas had once taught her. 6 bullets. "Come on now," Hollister called, his voice dripping false sweetness. "We don't want to hurt the baby. Just hand yourself over and we'll let him live." Dahlia positioned herself in front of Samuel, gun raised toward the door. "Stay back," she shouted. "I'll shoot," raucous laughter answered her. "Hear that, boys? The little lady's going to shoot us." The door handle turned, then rattled as they found it locked. Dahlia's hands trembled, but she kept the gun pointed steadily. A tremendous crash shook the door as someone slammed against it. Wood splintered at the hinges. Another crash, and the door gave way, revealing Reed Hollister and one of his men, both holding pistols. "Well, well," Reed drawled, eyeing the gun in her hands. "Ain't you full of surprises? Get out," Dahlia commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Leave us alone." Reed stepped forward, unconcerned by her threat. "Put the gun down, lady. You don't have the stomach to use it." "Don't I?" Dahlia cocked the hammer. "You killed innocent people. You took me from my home. You threatened my child." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "I have every reason to pull this trigger." Something in her voice must have convinced him she meant it, because Reed stopped advancing. His smirk faltered. "Now, let's not be hasty." A commotion downstairs interrupted him. Shouts, the sound of breaking furniture, more gunfire. Reed turned his head slightly, distracted by the noise. Dahlia seized the moment and fired. The bullet caught Reed in the shoulder, spinning him back. His companion fired wildly, the shot going wide as Dahlia dove to the floor, covering Samuel with her body. She rolled, brought the gun up again, and fired twice more. One bullet missed, but the other struck the second man in the chest. He crumpled to the floor with a gurgling cry. Reed, clutching his bleeding shoulder, lunged for her with a roar of rage. Dahlia scrambled backward, but he caught her ankle, dragging her toward him as she kicked and fought. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, raising his gun to her head. A deafening shot rang out, but not from Reed's gun. His eyes widened in shock, a dark stain spreading across his chest. He toppled forward, revealing Zach standing in the doorway, his smoking revolver still aimed at the outlaw's back. "Dahlia," Zach rushed to her side, eyes wild with fear and relief. "Are you hurt? Where's Samuel?" "We're all right," she gasped, pointing to the bed where Samuel was screaming but unharmed. "Franklin, he's alive," Zach assured her, helping her to her feet. "Took a bullet in the arm, but he'll make it. Ryder and the others are downstairs with the 3rd Hollister." As the full impact of what had happened hit her, Dahlia's legs gave way. Zach caught her, pulling her against his chest as she began to shake uncontrollably. "I shot him," she whispered. "I shot a man." "You protected your child," Zach said fiercely, his arms tightening around her. "You did what you had to do." She looked up at him, suddenly registering a bloodstain on his side. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he dismissed, though his face was drawn with pain. "Caught some buckshot during the firefight, worth it to get back in time." "In time?" she repeated, confused. "We caught Jasper Hollister 2 days ago," Zach explained, still holding her. "He told us Reed was planning to come after you. We rode night and day to get back." His voice roughened. I was afraid we'd be too late." More men appeared in the doorway, Marshal Ryder and others from the posse, come to secure the scene. Zach reluctantly released Dahlia, allowing her to retrieve Samuel, who calmed somewhat in his mother's arms. "You're quite the shot, Mrs. Adams," Ryder observed, nodding toward Reed Hollister's body. "Not many could stand their ground against the Hollisters." "I had something worth fighting for," she replied, pressing a kiss to Samuel's head. The aftermath of the shootout was chaotic. Bodies were removed, statements taken, injuries tended to. Zach refused to leave Dahlia's side, even when the doctor insisted on treating his wounds. Only when Samuel had been fed and put to bed, and the house secured for the night with deputies posted outside, did Zach finally allow himself to rest. Dahlia found him on the back porch, staring out at the star-filled sky. His left side was heavily bandaged beneath his unbuttoned shirt, and exhaustion lined his face. "You should be in bed," she chided gently. "So should you," he countered, but made room for her on the bench beside him. They sat in companionable silence for a time, the events of the day settling around them like dust after a storm. "It's over now," Zach said finally. "3 Hollisters dead, 2 in custody. They'll hang for what they've done." "Will that bring you peace?" Dahlia asked softly. Zach considered this, his profile stark in the moonlight. "I thought it would. For 2 years all I wanted was justice for Daniel." He turned to look at her. "But when we heard they were coming for you, all I could think about was getting back to you and Samuel. Nothing else mattered." Something warm unfurled in Dahlia's chest. "When I saw you in that doorway," she whispered, "I knew everything would be all right." His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "I meant what I said that first day," he said, his voice low and intense. "I've been waiting for you both. I just didn't know it until I almost lost you." "What are you saying, Zach?" He shifted to face her more fully, wincing slightly at the movement. "I'm saying that I know it hasn't been long and your life has been turned upside down, and maybe this is crazy. But I can't imagine this house without you and Samuel in it." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I don't want to imagine it." Dahlia's breath caught in her throat. "Are you asking us to stay as your housekeeper?" "No," he said firmly. "Not as my housekeeper." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking if someday, when you're ready, you might consider becoming my wife." Tears sprang to Dahlia's eyes, unexpected but not unwelcome. In the short time she'd known him, Zachariah Kane had shown her more kindness, more respect, and more steadfast protection than she'd experienced in years. What had begun as necessity had grown into something neither of them had anticipated. "I think," she said carefully, "that someday might be sooner than you expect." Joy blazed across his face, chasing away the weariness. Slowly, mindful of his injuries, he leaned forward to press his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Dahlia responded with a certainty that surprised even her, her free hand coming up to cup his jaw. When they finally parted, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I promised I'd come back," he murmured. "And I'm very glad you did, Marshal Kane," she replied with a smile. 3 months later, on a clear January morning in 1883, Dahlia Adams became Dahlia Kane in a simple ceremony at Jerome's small church. Samuel, now nearly 10 months old and recently taking his first tottering steps, was passed among the wedding guests who had quickly become friends Martha and George Wilson, Deputy Franklin with his arm still in a sling, and a dozen others who had welcomed Dahlia into their community. U.S. Marshal Ryder had returned for the occasion, bringing news that the remaining Hollisters had been sentenced to hang for their crimes. The chapter had closed on that dark time, leaving room for new beginnings. After the wedding, as guests gathered at the Kane house for celebration, Zach pulled Dahlia aside for a moment of privacy on their back porch. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. It was my mother's. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Dahlia gasped as he fastened it around her neck, the metal cool against her skin. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching it reverently. "Open it," Zach urged. Inside were two miniature photographs, one of Samuel, grinning his new toothed smile, and one of Zach, looking uncharacteristically serious in his formal portrait. "Now you always have your men with you," he said, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. Dahlia's heart swelled with love for this man who had started as her rescuer and become so much more. "I love it," she said. "And I love you, Zachariah Kane. And I love you, Dahlia Kane." He drew her into his arms, still marveling that she was his wife. "Who would have thought, when I bid on you that day, that you were really bidding on your future?" she finished for him, smiling up at him. "Best $100 I ever spent," he murmured against her lips before kissing her soundly. From inside came the sound of laughter and Martha Wilson's voice calling them back to their guests. Hand in hand, they returned to the celebration, no longer Marshal and rescued woman, but husband and wife, starting a new chapter in a story that had begun in the most unlikely of ways. 5 years passed, transforming the Kane household and Jerome itself. The mining town had grown, boasting a new schoolhouse, an expanded general store, and even a small theater where traveling shows performed. Zach had been elected sheriff of the entire county 2 years earlier, his reputation for fairness and determination making him the obvious choice when the old sheriff retired. The house on the hill had expanded too, a new wing added to accommodate their growing family. Samuel, now 5½, was joined by 3-year-old twins Daniel and Elizabeth, named for Zach's brother and Dahlia's mother. On a warm June evening in 1888, Dahlia sat on the porch swing, watching Zach teach Samuel to throw a lariat in the yard while the twins chased fireflies in the growing dusk. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, where their 4th child, another boy, she suspected was due in less than 2 months. Life had settled into a rhythm she could never have imagined that terrifying day at the auction block. She had found not just safety but joy, purpose, and a love that deepened with each passing year. "Mama, look," Samuel called, successfully looping his small rope around a fence post. "I did it." "Wonderful, darling," she called back, smiling at the pride on both Samuel's and Zach's faces. The twins abandoned their firefly hunt and raced to their father, demanding their turn. Zach scooped up Elizabeth in one arm, letting Daniel try to drag the rope that was nearly as big as he was. "Almost bedtime, cowboys," Dahlia called as the sun dipped below the horizon. A chorus of protests rose up, but Zach's firm "listen to your mother" quelled the rebellion. He herded the children toward the house, Elizabeth still perched on his hip, Samuel chattering about his roping success, and Daniel trailing the rope behind him. As they passed Dahlia, Zach leaned down to kiss her. "How's my latest deputy doing?" he asked, his free hand joining hers on her belly. "Active," she replied with a smile. "Taking after his father already." Later, after the children were tucked in bed with stories read and prayers said, Zach and Dahlia sat together on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder as they enjoyed the peaceful night. "I had a letter from Marshal Ryder today," Zach said, his arm draped comfortably around her shoulders. "He's retiring next month, suggested I might consider applying for his position." Dahlia sat up to look at him. "U.S. Marshal, that would be quite an honor." "It would," he agreed. "But it would mean more time away from home, more danger." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "I told him I'm happy where I am. Are you sure? You'd make an excellent U.S. Marshal," Zach smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes crinkling. I'm sure. I've had enough adventure for one lifetime. What I want now is to watch our children grow up, to come home to you every night. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Besides, Jerome needs a sheriff who knows every one of its ornery citizens by name. Dahlia leaned back against him, contentment washing over her. Do you ever think about that day, the auction? Sometimes, Zach admitted. I remember how scared you looked, how tightly you were holding Samuel. His voice softened. And I remember knowing, somehow, that I needed to be the one to take you home. My hero, she murmured, only half teasing. He chuckled. As I recall, you saved yourself quite handily when the Hollisters came calling. Shot Reed better than most deputies could have. Let's hope our children never need those kinds of skills, Dahlia said, sobering. They won't, Zach promised. Times are changing. The wild days are fading. By the time Samuel's grown, trains will connect every town and telegraphs every home. Progress, Dahlia mused. Though I hope some things never change. Like what? Like this, she said, gesturing to their entwined hands, the house behind them full of sleeping children, the life they'd built together. Like us. Zach's kiss was his answer, tender and certain, a promise kept and renewed. When they parted, he placed his hand once more on her belly, delighted by the strong kick that greeted his touch. Another Kane with a good right hook, he observed with a grin. Dahlia laughed. Heaven help Jerome when this one starts walking. As night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking of small things, Samuel's progress in school, the twins' latest adventures, names for the baby. Ordinary moments in an extraordinary life that had begun with an act of desperation and courage. We should go in, Dahlia said eventually, stifling a yawn. Early start tomorrow. Zach nodded but made no move to rise. Just a few more minutes, he said, pulling her closer. It's not often I get you to myself these days. She smiled, settling against him. A few more minutes then. Above them, stars scattered across the Arizona sky like diamonds on velvet. Below, the lights of Jerome twinkled on the mountainside. And between, on their porch on the hill, Zach and Dahlia Kane held each other close, grateful for the auction that had brought them together and the love that had made them a family. The end.